The motorcycle that's famous for most likely outliving us all, the Kawasaki KLR 650, the everyday man's adventure bike. And with that, welcome back to the Freemouse MC. This is the bike that we're going to have a look at today, and wow, it's quite an enormous machine. You maybe don't see it on video, but the proportions of this bike are very, very big. This bike is powered by a 651cc liquid-cooled engine. Kawasaki was pretty early with that for a single-cylinder enduro in 1988. I think all other bikes were air-cooled still at the time from Honda and Yamaha. And this engine produces 46 horsepower and 47 Nm of torque. That's what's listed in the papers of this machine. There's some other machines that are later models that are listed with 48 horsepower. And yeah, what an incredible bike. Of course, those power figures don't really shock anyone, but what is this motorcycle about? It's about utility and getting you very far. The bike has a 23-liter tank, with which it can reach over 500 kilometers depending on your driving style. This bike is quite a can-do-it-all machine with 230 millimeters in the front and in the rear when it comes to suspension travel and 27 centimeters of ground clearance. That's what I call a dual sport, and wow, just look at the proportions of this bike with its enormous tank, enormous forks. Those are Kaiba forks. The bike has a 21-inch front wheel and 17-inch rear wheel. This bike comes in with a very high seat height of 89 centimeters. This particular model has been raised by 3 centimeters. Let me have a sit on it. For context, I am 6'5" or 1.95 m. I can still flat-foot the thing with quite a comfortable knee angle, but I think for anyone who's a bit smaller it could become a real issue. For me it's basically the perfect size, also with the handlebars. This is, this is basically perfect, I have to say. So let's get this thing on the road and see how capable this old KLR actually is. So we are now here with this motorcycle in the forest. We're doing a bit of off-road riding. The first gear is a bit tough to get into, but apart from that, the bike feels pretty alright. The bike is relatively heavy. It weighs 190 kilos. I now shift into second gear. 190 kilos, of course, for a dual sport is pretty heavy. But the bike control here in the mud, we have Hayden K60 Scout tires on. So it's a bit adventurous with the very road-oriented tires. It does pretty well though. You definitely have good control over the bike also here in the turns, and when it gets to sliding a bit. The gears feel very torquey. When you shift up you instantly feel that the bike has a 5-speed transmission. So you can feel the weight is pretty high to where you're riding. So it's not super low, but it's still very fine to manage. And the big front wheel makes light work of everything and keeps the bike very well on track. And even if it starts sliding around, the bike just follows it pretty nicely. Okay, now through this stuff here again. Let's go over those branches right here. Yeah, the big front wheel does that with ease. The KLR 650 doesn't really quickly heat up, so you have quite a bit of off-road riding until the bike starts to overheat, which of course with it being liquid cooled is a big advantage. So I think we can say this bike is pretty utilitarian and makes light work of almost everything while still being a heavy piece of material, I have to say. But we're managing. The bike manages to get really low in the revs and just keeps going. And you can also shift pretty easily while standing and riding. And even deep mud like this here is no issue whatsoever. Even though this bike is 36 years old, it's definitely today still competitive with the bikes that we've ridden on the channel that are more modern. Let's get the bike a bit going. Yeah, also shifting while standing up is pretty doable. You just need to give the thing pretty clear inputs, how with all big old one cylinders, but it's doing fine. So we're now here with the Kawasaki KLR on the open road, and the brake is very homeopathical. This thing basically does not work. As you just saw, I came down this road and the brake at the front cannot be trusted whatsoever. Not in the slightest. Honestly, it's ridiculous that they put this small brake rotor on this bike, as a bike with this weight often comes with like a brake rotor of like 300 millimeters, and often also two of them, and this just has one, which is enduro typical, but such a small one with one caliper. What is this? The bike just died on me. The bike is off. What just happened? Okay, let me... Most likely I've ran out of fuel. So let's put the thing in reserve. Here we go. Ah. Let me turn around. Get back on the bike. And just roll down the hill. And get some speed going. We now have the thing in reserve. So... it should fire up. For some reason it doesn't fire up well. We have the first gear in. Let's see if this works. Come on, come on, come on, you can do it. Don't die on me. It just doesn't get fuel. It doesn't get fuel, that's the problem. So yeah, that's how it can be with older bikes. The bike ran out of fuel and it took some time until the bike managed to get some fuel again. That's how it can sometimes be with bikes like that, and it's crazy that the bike has this super weak front brake, but this bike has been predominantly sold in America if you compare America and Europe. And America, the more inexperienced riders for some reason in America have a tendency to more use the rear brake, most likely because of like their chopper and Harley culture, and that's where this bike has been predominantly sold, as this bike is basically what the Transalp is to us Europeans. But Jesus Christ, the bike is very under braked, but I gotta say the handling apart from that is okay. It handles the roads for a dual sport relatively good, as you can see here. And with one cylinder, which we're having here, it's very vibraty, and it vibrates a lot, but you don't feel the vibration in the steering, which I like. And you can literally sit on this bike forever. It is very, very comfortable. So, like literally, I could sit on this bike for 13 hours most likely and would not have any physical points of suffering on my body. And yeah, this is very fine. The bike also has definitely enough power to overtake here, but one thing has to be said, the bike does not have a rev limiter. So you can rev the bike out until the engine just explodes, basically. And you should not rev it up over 7. The wind protection that is not as visible from the outside here and looks very typical enduro-ish, is also doing its job very well. I don't feel much of the wind. And yeah, you can actually also lean the bike over quite nicely. And of course that's a lot also because it's on Hayden K60 Scout tires, which is just a really nice tire. It's my personal tire of choice as well when it comes to adventure touring, so it's good on road and it's also decent enough off-road. Oh no, the bike is slowing down again. We don't have any performance. What is it doing? Fuck. And it's off. And I cannot stop because the brakes are shit. So, I think we are stuck now here. Shit. I think we just ran out of fuel because the thing doesn't have a fuel meter, as we just found out. And before we went on our little trip here, we did not check how much fuel is in the machine. So yeah, now we're stuck here. That's not fun.
In the end, it turned out that the issues came from rust getting stuck in the carburetors from the rusty tank, but Eric, the owner of this machine, managed to figure it out and we got home. So we now made it back, even with rust in the tank, and it was all fine. But that's just sometimes how it is with motorcycles that you buy for, how much was it? 950 bucks?
Euros.
Yeah, that's pretty cheap for those bikes, because those ones usually go on the used market for 2,000 bucks here in Europe. I don't know how the situation is in America, but they must be a bit cheaper there in perspective, as they have just been sold there more, quite a lot more. And how much money did you put into your 950 KLR to now make it work?
Actually, I'm not counting all the maintenance parts like brake pads, brake fluid and stuff. But I did the general maintenance, I did everything at once. But I invested into a new exhaust because the old one was rusted off, it was terrible. I invested in stiffer fork springs and a few other bits, so I'm around at 340 euros into this bike and I'm not finished. There's a full restoration coming this winter, and after the restoration, that guy maybe wants to do a new review.
Yeah, okay, then maybe we get to review actually one that is then close to new. But I gotta say, even with the condition that the bike is in, with the rusty tank and so on, 1,300 roughly for the whole bike, how it's standing here, is pretty good. And the KLR is just such a workhorse, because everything on the bike feels like it's made to be easily serviced and also made to just work well. The bike doesn't do anything in particular pretty well. I feel like it has enough power, definitely. I think the main criticism on this bike, it does not have enough power. It does a standing quarter mile in 14 seconds, which is completely alright, and for a travel bike absolutely sufficient. And it's fast, it's fun in the turns, fun enough, and handles off-road, fun enough. My favorite feature on the bike is that you can read the oil change level while the bike is standing on its side stand, which makes it like little things like that they thought of this. How was it to service the rest of the bike? Because you did some work on it, on the valves and everything.
Well, I have to correct you first, because it's not the oil level, which you can see on the side stand, it's the coolant level, because these engines are still prone to fail due to an incorrect placed water pump seal. I corrected that, but they made it so you can actually look at it when it's on the side stand, so you don't have to pull it aside. Maintenance wise, this bike is actually pretty simple, which I love about this bike. I cleaned the carburetor, adjusted the carburetor, I did the head gasket because it was done. I adjusted the valves, the full oil change, brake fluid change. I completely overhauled the brake system, but it didn't really get any better. So yeah, but you can do everything yourself on this bike. There is nothing on this bike that could give you any issues maintaining it. It's really maintenance friendly.
That's actually really, really nice, and I feel like that's a really big argument for the bike, especially with it being a single cylinder and you only having to do one carburetor. So if you get into stuff like that, you can also start with this bike, I feel like. And yeah, I would say pretty good package, except for that the brakes can be considered attempted murder. But yeah, apart from that, pretty solid bike. Leave your opinion on the KLR 650 from 1988 in the comments. And definitely thanks to Eric for basically now having let me review all of his bikes, as they're now standing, all of them here. And definitely leave your opinion on the KLR 650 from 1988 in the comments. And if you have a bike that you would like me to review, feel free to write me an email and check out the Patreon. And see you guys soon.